We have Professor Shrikant Kondapalli. He is a professor in Chinese studies in JNU. Abhijit Iyer Mitra, an expert on strategic affairs, and Tenzin Sundu, a famous Tibetan activist, and he has been active with the Tibetan freedom movement for long. I also welcome some of our special guests, Madame Chargée d'Affaires, Portugal Embassy, Ms. Sofia Batalha. I think she has joined, or Mr. C.D. Sahai, former chief of RNDW, Mr. Namdol Agyari, MP, Tibetan government, and Dr. Gautam Sen. I think he should be joining in some time. So I'll just give a brief overview on what questions we'll be raising today. After the recent India-China standoff, many voices from general quarters and from expert strategic quarters have started talking about the fact that India should be rethinking about its one China policy. Maybe the standoff has given a sense of urgency to the matter, but many of us, have always wondered that why has India so far followed its one China policy when China gives stapled visas to people from Arunachal Pradesh and Pradesh and people from Kashmir. When China supports a completely jihadi extremist and Pakistani-sponsored insurgency in Kashmir, so why we are being so generous? Besides that, a very important question. An institution of Panchen Lama, the holy institution of Panchen Lama, has been sabotaged by the Chinese government. There is a very strong possibility that the high institution of Dalai Lama, maybe they might just try to do the same thing to that institution. So what happens to the Buddhist question after that? What happens to the Buddhist cultural identity after that? That is a big question. Maybe it is a strategic question for many of us, and on the other hand, it is a humanitarian question, a question of someone's cultural identity for a large group of people. Besides that, we'll be discussing various other questions during our conversation, like where we failed in understanding China over the last 50, 60 years. And I'll begin with Mr. Krishan Varma, sir. Sir, please.
Shrikant, sir, will you be able to take it on?
Yes. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Perfect.
Thank you very much. Let me thank the organizers and a very good evening to my audience, fellow panelists. I'm seeing Mr. Varma after a long time. It was a pleasant surprise. Let me briefly say that One China policy was enunciated in December 1949 till April 1950. But that was pertaining to Taiwan issue, not to Tibet issue. The One China principle from an Indian point of view is related to Taiwan in the initial period. And it caused a lot of consternation as well, when for these 4 months, the Indian officials, Chinese officials, were discussing about what to do with the Taiwan embassy, the Republic of China embassy in New Delhi, their properties, their personnel, what should be done after the Communist Party won the civil war against the Kuomintang, and the Kuomintang was driven to Taiwan. During this time, there were these discussions between India and China. Just to update, the Indian government had an embassy in Chongqing, the wartime capital, with the Republic of China. So Sardar Panikkar was the ambassador, and we also had consul generals in Xinjiang, in Lhasa, in various other places. So when the British left India, we have taken the mantle, and the Republic of China was positioned in Chongqing, so we had diplomatic relations. Within 2 years, the Communist Party won the civil war, and then after the KMT withdrew to Taiwan, we switched our relations with the PRC from ROC, Republic of China. So the One China policy actually was mainly related to Taiwan problem in the India-China context. And Mao Zedong in 1949 had enunciated three major policy options. One is setting up a different kitchen. So he would suggest that all the other diplomatic contacts that China had before should be abolished, and afresh there should be discussions with the Communist Party led PRC in terms of establishing diplomatic relations. So that's where the One China principle came up. Actually, the India was the first one to have used this word One China because the Soviet Union and its East European allies have recognized the PRC as a fellow communist state, but it is India, Burma, and Pakistan were the ones which are non-socialist, and they recognize the PRC. It was then that the One China principle came up in. So what did India say? India simply stated that Taiwan is an inalienable portion of India, a portion of China, sorry. And as a part of this, the negotiations began and Republic of India started supporting PRC in the United Nations, in various other bodies. Subsequently, in about 4 years' time, we also had the Panchil Principle signed, which is where Tibet was announced to be part of China, but in more oblique manner rather than in a direct manner. So this is a nuanced position where Tibet is considered as part of China from a trade perspective at that time. And then subsequently we had the Dalai Lama's flight, as well as the India-China territorial dispute and the borders commissions. Now that's the broader context for the One China principle. Now, every joint statement, we reiterated that position till about 2010, when we refused to acknowledge the One China principle explicitly in our joint statements. So that is one change that happened because as Mr. Pandya mentioned, there was the staple visas issued to Kashmiri residents, and General Jaswal was not given the visa. So in this background, India also put its foot down and did not announce the One China principle in the 2010 joint statement. Of course, it doesn't mean India had rejected the One China principle, because Article 1 and Article 2 of the 2010 joint statement did mention about the previous agreements in place, which includes the One China principle. However, in 2013, Dr. Manmohan Singh went to China, and under Chinese pressure, he reiterated the One China principle in a oblique manner. What he said was, India and China oppose those who oppose the One China principle. So that is a two oppositions has been brought about, and this has created, a kind of confusion in the ranks of a lot of diplomats. Now, that is one portion as far as the Taiwan issue is concerned. In terms of Tibet, in 1954, as we discussed, there was the Nehru's observation that Tibet is part of China in the Panchil principles. Subsequently, in 1988, we have had Rajiv Gandhi's visit to China, and he inserted the word autonomous in describing about the Tibet position within the overall India-China relations. Now, subsequently, Prime Minister Vajpayee visited in 2003, and he mentioned about the Tibet Autonomous Region as part of the People's Republic of China. So the difference here is in 1965, Tibet was divided as part of the provincial reorganization, much like what we did in J&K and Ladakh Union Territories last year. The Chinese in 1965 divided Tibet into the Tibet Autonomous Region, and the other regions were amalgamated in Qinghai and in Sichuan and Yunnan provinces. This was a 1965 reorganization on which, unfortunately, we did not even comment on this. While China had taken the reorganization, the 370 article abrogation and the 35 article amendment to the United Nations Security Council and raised this issue 3 times so far. And it is likely, in the background of the Galwan incident, likely to take up in a more concrete manner in the next few weeks and months. So the one China principle is one where we tie down our own legs in such a way that it becomes a constraining feature. There is no announcement officially in regard to the opposition to the one China principle. However, Sushma Swaraj, during her first meeting with Foreign Minister Wang Yi in May 2014, they finished talking, and then just about when Wang Yi was about to leave the meeting, she asked him, so we adhere to the one China principle so far. How about one India policy? And he didn't, Wang Yi was surprised at this suggestion. He didn't say anything. In diplomatic parlance, if you have said this at the end of the meeting, it means that the issue is hanging and this is for the next meeting. Of course, both of them met several times, and the current foreign minister, Dr. Jaishankar, but the one China equated to one India never came up formally and in public domain. So this is one where I think in terms of policy option, we need to also look at more carefully and start putting pressure on China. In terms of the Kashmir or Northeast or other parts of India to be part of the One India policy in relation to or in reciprocity to the One China principle. However, it appears to be last few weeks, days, the ground reality seems to be changing pretty fast. So I think we also need to be cautious about the reciprocity principle because there is, number one, a border mobilization. There is also the Hong Kong situation, Taiwan situation. Then you have South China Sea, Senkaku Islands. Many of these issues have now come to the fore. So the Chinese have used one China for all these. Dai Pingko in 2007 mentioned about all these aspects, Taiwan, Tibet, South China Sea, Senkaku Islands. So we have to be very conscious of this. What does that mean for us in terms of our own foreign policy? I think we need to put our foot down on this aspect. So let me stop here. I'm willing to take questions on the one China principle and what should be the India's foreign policy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. I'll come back to you after the others. Mr. Krishan Varma, sir, please.
Thank you very much, Abhinav, for inviting me to this webinar. I think I would like to thank Usanas Foundation for taking this very timely topic up. And I think what a wonderful panel of people, and I'm proud to be and privileged to be part of this panel. Discuss one of the most crucial and critical issues that are confronting us at this point of time. Actually, I'm happy that Shrikant took the lead because I think he gave a very, very good approach of the historical perspective, which I thought I would have covered in my opening remarks as to what is the history behind Tibet, the recognition, as well as the changing stances that the Indian government has made since independence, and what we have done to advance at this point of time. So he's covered that ground, so I'm not going to repeat that at all. What I'm going to look at is actually part of deviate a little from my prepared comments and go straight into what is the state of play today, and what is, there are two ways of looking at this. One is a practical way forward, a doable way forward, a sustainable way forward, which could also have legal salience and sustainability. And on the other hand, we have to be able to deal with this very assertive, very aggressive China, which is now going back into its own formulation of being the Middle Kingdom and is going to regain all the lost territories as part of a China dream which Xi Jinping has enunciated in 2013. And he seems to be going about it with a mission. One could have not imagined that the Chinese would actually take on virtually everybody in the world, right? Starting from the East China Sea, the South China Sea to Taiwan, to assert themselves as the unbridled power here, which is superior and dominant in Asia. Are they trying to prove a point over here? It's very difficult to assess at this point of time, but they've chosen a very critical time when the whole world was either distracted or it has been suffering and dealing with the pandemic that they moved forward. Uh, and it has to be a predetermined, it has to be a premeditated move forward, and we need to actually deal with it. I think the time has come for India to really take a very cold, hard look at the facts on the ground. And if we have to rally, we have to stop them where they are in their tracks in Ladakh, certainly along the Indian territory. But we also have to look at it slightly in a more broader perspective as to how we can actually work with like-minded countries, with other democracies who are threatened or could be threatened in the long term as a concert together to see how we can at least, if not, well, they go into confrontation, but at least manage them in a way that we do not launch in these kind of very dangerous adventures that they have not. Let me get back to the point where Srikant had mentioned about 2014, when our former foreign minister had actually hinted at a one India policy and had almost sort of predicated this to as an agreement for a one China, that we need to sort of look at one India. I believe, and this is my own personal opinion, that I think we have an opportunity since then of not picking this up. And in our various interactions at the highest levels, that we did not actually pursue this. There is meaning and substance in this. I think the Chinese were able to somehow lull us into a sense of what would I say? I shouldn't use the word complacency, because I don't think we are complacent, but a sense of comfort, a sense of trust. They kept harping on the fact. I think we need to pick this up and redevelop it. I think we got caught up into the spirit of where the Chinese have led us, and I think have led us through 1950 with some very astute, very shrewd, very deft diplomacy of saying that we need to build trust, and they have engaged you in various conversations and taken you away from the main point of contention, which was the boundary, and have taken us into trade, have taken us to economic, have actually, we have cooperated with them in the international arenas on various common issues. But when I was preparing for this, I was looking at the last 30, 40 years and saying, where did the Chinese ever concede anything? Something substantial to India? Have they ever done that? Even when we let go of, and I'm using this word a little deliberately, but maybe a little loosely, let go of the Tibetan and our interaction with them in 2018 in February, perhaps as a lead up to the summit, and said that no, we will stop interaction and we will not participate, and there'll be a difference in the way we deal with them. I think they lulled us into something that I still am looking for a quid pro quo for having done. But nevertheless, I think the time has come. They've given back to you, and a reappraisal of the Tibet policy is definitely on the anvil. We really need to look at. We are claiming areas which are clearly geographically, historically, socially, culturally, spiritual yours. That is definitely there. I think there's a larger plan that they have in mind, and I think Shrikant was right when he said that the One China policy had its roots in Taiwan, but this is where it is. I think we have to now. I think there's a commonality and mutuality of interest which have developed in the peripheral region of China, And I think we need to get on to the reappraisal. Now, I think what I'll do is in the next part, I guess we will come back. We could possibly look at what could be those ingredients. What could be that one China policy? How can we review it? What steps can we take to reappraise India's Tibet policy? But I will definitely leave this with a little quote which I read, and this was about why China moved into Tibet and how Tibet is so critical and crucial to them and to the rest of, well, at least the southern part of Asia. And this was that whoever controls Tibet handles and predominates the Piedmont, threatens the Indian subcontinent, can actually take over South Asia and eventually Asia. I think this is what is in their mind, and I think we have to be mindful. And they're actually playing it out. So it's just not an adage which has been quoted from some place, but I think this is exactly how they are going forward on it. We also have to keep in mind that Tibet is extremely critical for us, crucial, and it is a national security issue with India, and it should have been always been one of that. Was a great buffer in China and India. We need that. It is controls some very, very major resources. Water is one, of course, there. But anything that they do there, anything that they do towards us, it threatens all those resources. They have control over many, many more water resources which flow into it. And therefore, we really need to look at this very coldly and leave some of the niceties, I would imagine. I think they have actually reneged on every protocol, every kind of agreement. They have done that. I don't see why we have to play good. We still are a civilized nation and we will stand by our agreement. But we've got to get somehow China to begin to also observe and respect the agreements that it signed with friendly countries and friendly civilizations, especially in the neighborhood. Let me stop here and maybe I can come back to it later with supplementary. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. You brought very interesting points forward. I guess, most importantly, that they lulled us into a sense of complacency. So that is also a very interesting question to explore, like what failed our strategic understanding of China? Why we got lulled? Where did our diplomats fail? Actually, it seems that China has, the important part about the strategic value of Tibet, deep down inside, they have very strong strategic objectives and calculations. Dialogue holds no meaning for them. 22 border rounds failed with them as far as Indian boundary dispute settlement is concerned. Even in case of Tibet, the Kashag spirit, which started in 1979 to reach a consensus on Tibetan issues, that also failed, which means that dialogue has no importance for the Chinese Communist Party, raising a very relevant question for the future. Then what is the way out to deal with China? I'll come back to you regarding this question and the other questions like how should we revise the One China policy. But before that, I'll request Abhijit Iyer Mitra to please come and share his views. Abhijit, yes.
Thank you, Abhinav. I'm just going to dwell on two legal issues and then move on to prognosticating for the future. The first issue is our serial blunders that we've committed over the past in sort of recognizing Tibet as a part of China. In fact, recognizing a lot of the outliers as a part of China, which we probably shouldn't have done. A simple example of this was, the United States, for example, never accepted the accession of Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia to the USSR. Basically, the USSR went and annexed these countries, and America never accepted that. So they always retained the right to have these political movements, these Latvian, Lithuanian, Estonian emigre movements, carry on activities in their soil perfectly legally. So this is something which was an important leverage that we've continuously lost without getting anything in return, by the way. Nothing in writing, nothing anyway from the Chinese. On the other hand, the USSR was never able to talk up things like, say, Hawaii, because Russia, the predecessor state and now the state of the USSR, accepted the accession of Hawaii to the USA. Well, not the accession, the invasion and annexation of Hawaii to the USA. So there is a question of legal precedent out here and how you talk it back. This forms the cornerstone of how we conduct our policies towards Tibet and towards the One China policy from now on, because you have fundamentally accepted the One China policy. This from the external view. The second point of view I want to look at is the internal point of view with regards to Tibet. So I've been to Tibet about 3 times so far. The last time was during the Doklam crisis when we'd gone to Shigatse and places like that. And what you see is the kind of air of terror around there. When you go around Jokhang and things like that, yes, there's no trouble or whatever, but you can see that there are people with machine guns on the roof around Jokhang. There are observation posts there. They're ready for any kind of trouble. There is always security scanning. And you can just see the sort of cultural usurpation happening. Now, communist countries are usually very, very good at wiping out people's culture. But amazingly, this has taken much, much longer with the Tibetans than we've seen with, say, what the Soviets did to Central Asia. One of the things I remember most vividly when I was in Bokhara about 2 years back was I wear a kurta pajama. Incidentally, this is the same kurta I was wearing when I went to the madrasa of Ulugh Beg in Bokhara. And Ulugh Beg was the grandson of Timur. And this teacher at the madrasa, he very excitedly calls me in. And he offers me sala and vodka sitting inside a madrasa. Sala is, salted pork fat. For a Muslim preacher to be doing that in Bokhara, you need to, in a madrasa, you need to understand the level of cultural brainwashing that has happened of these people. For me, growing up as a committed leftist, this was always a wonderful thing. I thought it was, this wonderful modernization of this primitive Turkic people to new European paradigms. And when I came back and told all my Bangladeshi and Pakistani friends about these stories, they were completely horrified because they're like, look, this is a complete culture wiped out. Now, what is amazing about Tibet is it has survived so much brutality and it has still managed to retain its culture far, far better than any of these Central Asian republics have. This is one of the strengths we have to play to. So, what do we do in terms of the One China policy? Because legally we have now signed on to it. Your only option is to do what China does with everything else it signs, be it the Hong Kong, one country, two systems agreement, be it all their false promises on nuclear proliferation or missile proliferation, which they keep violating left, right, and center. A treaty signed with China has less worth than a sub $1 United Chinese made toy. The kind of third quality and quality assurance you get with a Chinese product is worse, is still better than what you get with their treaties. You just can't trust a treaty you sign with China. So what do? Because you are bound with legal precedents, the Chinese are not. You violate treaties in principle, you don't violate them in letter. So what are the things you can do here then? One is you need to vastly amplify, use your diplomatic means to amplify the message of Tibet, of the Tibetan migrant and exile community in India. You can't treat the Tibetans as, I'm sorry to say this and use this word, but treat them like condoms in this country. We use them when they're required, we throw them away when they're not required. They are a strategic asset for us. It is a cultural responsibility we have to protect Tibetan culture. And it has to be seen as a long-term asset to be used. So you have to use them as, you also have a responsibility to create, to strengthen their cultural resilience. Strategically, when you look at Tibet, why is this important? Because as we move militarily from a ground-centric point of a ground-centric combat paradigm to an air-centric combat paradigm, which is what all advanced countries do, from a ground-centric point of view, the capture, the ownership of Tibet was a huge negative for India. Whoever captured Tibet held the high ground. But if you look at it from an air warfare point of view, Tibet is a massive liability. Because anybody who occupies Tibet has to take off from airfields that are 10 to 15,000 feet high. They have to take, they have to supply routes are extremely narrow. You've got one road from the north, one road from the west, from the east, one railroad from the west, one railroad to the north, and that's about it. What more do you have? So these are all interception points. Fighting an air war in Tibet is an air planner's dream come true. But fighting a ground war in Tibet is every ground planner's nightmare come true. Right? So we have to adjust a whole set of things. Our whole mindset to this has to change. The third thing we need to look at is, are we realistically, deluding other people is fine. It's called projection. It's called strategic ambiguity. But strategic schizophrenia is never good. Sadly, in this country, we suffer from a lot of strategic delusions of our own. We are not in a position to take on China by ourselves. This is going to need, and certainly not directly, this is going to need a lot of guile. It's going to need a lot of deception. It is going to need a lot of manipulation. It's going to need a lot of gaslighting and mind games. It is going to need a lot of allies. You simply can't toss away Taiwan on the matter of principle. You can't say we're not going to align with America. Russia has already become junior partner to the Chinese. Every international track two that we go to, the Russians come up with a completely different position from the Chinese. And by the end of the track two, in about 2 days, they're all carrying on the Chinese point of view. This is the kind of, and the Chinese know exactly how to play the Russians because Russia is suffering from a loss of prestige. What they do is they allow the Russians to make all the hard decisions and go very, very combative. So then Russia gets the bulk of international condemnation, while China gets away with it, while China is the one that's actually sort of, in Tamil, we call it tunduvitifying, I don't know, inciting the Russians to do what they do. So these are all the myriad aspects we need to start looking at. If you are looking at ending your one China policy, remember it can't be done legally. It has to be done the same way China treats the nuclear non-proliferation regime. You swear to it absolutely. And so
The recording is on. We'll share the recording with others so you can start.
Cool. So I just wanted to finish off saying that you do unto China as they have done unto you. You pretend to follow everything, the letter of the law, sign on to every non-proliferation treaty, sign on to every mutual sovereignty respect treaty, sign on to every anti-terrorism treaty, and then go about violating it shamelessly in your face. And all you have to gain the discipline for is to lie and lie outrageously with a great deal of conviction. That is all, because that is what China does anyway. Be it nuclear non-proliferation, be it terrorism, be it anything else. Get some Uyghur separatists here, worst case scenario, and host a little World International Uyghur Festival, and we'll pass off some, I know, bombing classes as a traditional ritual where bonfires are set alight by Uyghur maidens and things like that. It's not that tough to do. I mean, if Pakistan can hold a little country can hold us back so badly, we can also hold China back. The question is, what is the price we want to pay? Which is why I say do this in a covert way and do this with a great deal of manipulativeness and deceptiveness. That is all.
Okay, so thank you very much for having me here. Okay, so now I want to look at the construction of this narrative called One China. What does it mean? What does it hold? The narrative of One China. What today's China was founded in 1949, and before that, China emerged as Republic of China in 1912, and that came about because of 1911 revolution there. Until 1911, there was no China. It was Manchu dynasty ruling over China. So only in 1911, China emerged as a free and independent country. Otherwise, China was under foreign occupation for almost about 300 years. But today's China's conception of this One China is that China is claiming the Yuan dynasty, the Mongolian rule over China, as theirs. China is claiming the Qing dynasty, which is the Manchu dynasty, the Manchu emperors ruling over China, as China's. So it's actually colonization of history. and China constantly projects itself as this contiguous history, and therefore legitimizing that as today's China. So if you actually look at this, this is the real reconstruction of China, and in all this, there is the real China that we are talking about, Xi Jinping China, is the one that happened in 1949. Now, within the identity, if we have to look at, we lost our country, we sought help from so many different places we didn't get. And when His Holiness the Dalai Lama escaped Tibet and came to India, we repudiated what is called the 17-point agreement with China and said we will continue to seek independence. Even in exile, there have been a lot of pressures, even from India, even from the government of India, there were a lot of pressures. I come from the second generation. I'm educated. The senior generation, one that before me, they tell me that so much of pressures government of India exerted on the Tibetans, especially Tibetan government in exile, and it came about for its survival, a diplomacy to seek what is called a genuine autonomy, being part of China, because it is congruent to one China policy. So this is how Tibetan government in exile maintained its survival diplomacy, seeking autonomy within People's Republic of China, which is incongruent to government of India's one China policy. Now, in all this, truly it is the people who have who survived all this, and with great sense of resilience, we have maintained our hope. And just as the previous speaker, Abhijit, was saying, for me, it's a kind of a miracle that 70 years of Chinese subjugation over Tibet and the of the Tibetans inside Tibet, and most importantly, led by the most dynamic with His Holiness the Dalai Lama leading the movement in this way. So now we have a time where India realizes that giving up on Tibet is not an answer for India. India realizes, having lost this number of soldiers at the border and the impending dangers all across the Himalayan borders. We are not talking about a small country when we are talking about Tibet. We are talking about 2.5 million square kilometers of land, which is 2/3 the size, which is in a way from China's China. It is that big that India, the realized awakened India, has to have a strong positioning, recognizing China's impending as every Indian country, and build up this relationship. And we work on India's one China policy, and this is defunct. And even diplomatically, I know I'm speaking in front of Shrikant Kondapalli and Mr. Krishna ji also, but this is diplomatically lopsided. You know, India is having to recognize entire region of China occupied countries as part of China, while China is having to recognize Kashmir as part of India. Even there, China is not doing well. China dragged India to the United Nations last year and troubled, and today China is questioning India's territorial integrity all across the Himalayas, and they have killed our own soldiers. So therefore, it is really high time that we junk this defunct, flawed one China policy and look forward, standing up to China face to face, one on one. This is all there to say for now, and I'm happy to discuss now.
Hello. Hi, Tenzin. Hello.
Yes.
Yeah, Tenzin. Thank you very much for giving an insightful perspective from your side. Just, I have a question to you. Like, okay.
Yes.
So exactly, you said that India has to disengage from this one China policy in the future. What else do you expect, and how far do you think that? I mean, to what extent this, free Tibet is a possibility? As you have been activists involved with this whole movement, do you think it's still a possibility of an independent and a free Tibet? After that, I'll come back to Kondapalli sir.
Well, at the moment, is a common alliance of people fighting for freedom from China. So there is the East Turkestan freedom movement, there is the Mongolian freedom movement, there is the Tibetans, and also the people in Hong Kong who are suffering Chinese bullying, and also Taiwan, who is independent. Just that because of Chinese pressure, Taiwan is not recognized. So we have a common alliance of these people who are fighting for freedom from China. This is a growing movement. This is going on. In fact, 3 years ago, we were having one conference here in Dharamshala, and Dolkun Isa, who was to represent East Turkestan movement in the conference, was denied a visa by India. So you see where it's standing. At that time, India was still in this delusion that our relationship with China is more important than supporting people who are fighting for freedom, for democracy under China and from China. Yeah. So most important, freedom is all in the mind. If you are willing, if you have decided, freedom will happen. But if you keep fearing the monster, you can never be free. Freedom firstly has to happen here. When India was under the British Empire for 200 years, it was Sri Aurobindo Ghosh who said India can be free, India must be free. Rabindranath Tagore sang songs and wrote poetry seeking where the freedom should happen in the mind. And then it came in the form of political movement led by Gandhiji and Subhash Chandra Bose and various other leaders. So for Tibetan people, freedom of Tibet is just a matter of political decision. Otherwise, we always feel that freedom is in our heart, and no one can take this away from us. We are free. It's just that politically our country is not free, and that will happen inevitably at some point of time, and that will happen.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Tenzin. Shrikant sir, can you hear me? Hello? Hello?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes, sir. So we'll get back to you where you left. Like, how can we actually do it? Like when we talk about revising India's one China policy, what can be the possible roadmap? Like, how it should unfold? Please enlighten us.
There are no, of course, easy solutions. The reciprocity for one China, one India is also a function of power. Meaning, if China's power is higher than compared with India, sometimes you have to accept this. Of course, we also need to learn from North Korea. North Korea is a $50 billion GDP, but US is an $18 trillion GDP. Kim Jong-un brought President Trump to Singapore and Hanoi. You can imagine a $50 billion GDP brought in an $18 trillion GDP person to Singapore and Hanoi. So sometimes if you use the asymmetries in power, you can still also manage to impose the costs. So that is a theoretical question, of course. I think we should start seeing reciprocity from China based on deliverance from the Chinese on this reciprocity for one China, one India. I think that was put up accurately by former Foreign Minister Sushma Swaraj. I think for this you also need to stand up. You need to impose the costs on the other and possibly stand up for your own rights. So that is one major aspect. The second is that you also have to, in conjunction with the Tibetans, Taiwanese, and others, you also need to really coordinate activities. So that is a second most important thing that you need to do. The third is, of course, there is many a country has signed the one China policy. In fact, all the 200 odd countries with which China today has diplomatic relations, except for 15 or so with who have relations with Taiwan. None of these countries got reciprocal arrangements from China. So it is in India's own interest to advertise this aspect on reciprocity and seek the whatever that India has to get from China on that one China, one India policies. It is very hard, but that is the way to go in this process. I also want to say a few things on Tibet, because the one China has been now equated to Tibet. There are also a larger problem that is emerging from Tibet. Number one is that there are 6 million people, but there are 6 million Tibetans, but there are 7.5 million Han Chinese. So there is a demographic change that is happening. Second is that there is China's structural power within Tibet is increasing substantially. Of course, it finally depends on how consolidated, how much solidarity the Tibetans themselves have. These are issues that the Tibetans have to decide. Nevertheless, China's structural power is increasing in Tibet. It is difficult to dislodge China in Tibet unless until these 6 million Tibetans unite and they fight a very long duration, kind of conflict. So it all depends on. The reason why I'm saying this is that when the Dalai Lama's representatives went to Tibet in 1976, the people started following the delegation and started revering the dust that was left on their trail. So indicating that the reverence for the Dalai Lama within Tibet is very high. The second, I would suggest, where the Tibetans have huge impact and influence among the Tibetans within Tibet is when the Dalai Lama asked the people in Tibet to boycott Satush wool and other environmentally degrading. It is nearly 98% of the people participated in this boycott of the killing of the antelope, the Satush wool generation, and so on. So I think there is a huge and intact support base for the Dalai Lama within Tibet. So this is a thing that needs to be further considered. So that is important. So I would end by saying it also depends on the solidarity and the effectiveness of the struggle by the Tibetans themselves in pushing forward countries like China, India, or others in terms of their struggle, their aspirations, their dreams. So let me stop here on this.
Hello.
We can hear you, Abhinav.
Yeah. Krishan sir, I'm coming back to you. Again, the same thing, like we were talking about this one China policy. Now, if we are abandoning it, how does it unfold? Is it just going to be a diplomatic exercise where we extend recognition, political and diplomatic legitimacy to Dalai Lama and even Taiwan for that matter? But there is an other aspect also, which Tenzin mentioned, that this one China thing is disturbing not just Tibet, many other countries also, like Taiwan also, even those islands there. So if there is a global mandate, if there is a global consensus coming up in a united manner against this, then something can be done in the real manner. So what is your take? Like, how do you see India in this context? Hello.
Let me let me pick up the threads from where Tenzin left off, as well as Srikanth mentioned. You know, Chinese have, and I'm just going to spend just a brief moment in recapitulating what the Chinese have done in Tibet, and then therefore, it gives a perspective as to what I'm going to say next. Is, look at the way they've done it. They've marginalized the people. They've culturally assimilated the people. There is a tremendous amount of repression. There's demographic structure has been completely mutated in their favor. So it's not easy to be able to roll back. And I don't think the idea for us, tactically speaking, is to go into physically or something to actually dismantle the Chinese structures which have come up in Tibet. And I think it's an impossible task and certainly not worth doing. But I think what we really need to do is we've already moved away from the recognition of a one China policy in diplomatic and official parlance. And as Srikanth very rightly put, one China was really in the context of Taiwan. Even in Hong Kong is one country, two systems. And that is recognized by people. We recognize the TAR, and we move from Tibet in suzerainty to TAR in terms of sovereignty, which I think was perhaps something that the Chinese pulled one fast one on us in exchange for Sikkim's recognition, which the whole world has recognized as part of India, and there was no question of annexation; it was a question of assimilation. And we sort of, I felt we missed an opportunity there. Where we could have possibly got the Chinese on the table to say, all right, you recognize J&K as part of India, and then we start talking about TAR. I think we've missed that equation somewhere. But having said that, that's history now, so there's no point going back into and rolling back. Too much time has gone. See, even in this context today, one China, when you say, are we going to accept the fact? And I'm going to go away from Ladakh, because here is an inflection point, and I'll come back to that later. But are we going to allow them to run away with whatever they've done in the South China Seas? They've taken territory, they've annexed it by force. They're deterring other people to come back and raise these issues. They have thrown away all the international norms and standards and of behavior. The rule-based systems have been thrown into the dustbin. It's the Chinese way or there's no way. That's the way it is. So even when we are conferring, even if we tend to confer this policy of one China, are we saying that we are legitimizing whatever it's already annexed in the South China Sea and is trying to annex in the East China Sea? Are we also, to that matter, I would even go, we talked about Russia a little while ago. Is Russia even prepared to allow this one China when they are nibbling away at Siberia? Why don't we bring these things? I think we really need to bring a lot of these things up. We have been, I think, I would criticize ourselves inwardly. I mean, and we were part of the policy making process, at least the suggestion. We have to be less ambivalent in our relationships. I think we have to be more cold. And I would, in fact, reach out back into the lexicon of history, which the Chinese have been doing over the last 50, 60 years. Look at how they've gone. Look at how they've developed their own muscles. Look at how they've coalesced with countries who have completely different ideologies, different systems, are hostile to them. The Chinese know that the whole idea of the West actually getting in with them in the 80s and 90s was to overthrow the Chinese Communist Party. That was the whole idea why the Americans got sucked in and everybody else in the world got sucked into China. But what happened? The Chinese have remained as Chinese as possible. And I think India will also remain exactly that. So I think we need to shed some of our ambivalence, some of our overcautious nature of doing things. We have come to a point, I think what 15 June has shown us today is that India is really at an inflection point. And when I say India, I think it's Asia, and I would think the world region is also at an inflection point. They really need to recognize that here is a country which has fed on these people, developed itself into a major power. It is a nuclear power. It's a huge economic power. There's no denying the fact. And they have got structure, they've got projects, they've got interlinkages with practically all parts of the world. But that doesn't mean that it cannot be stopped. If the US was a superpower for so many years and today is getting challenged by a power like this, why can't the world, at least if not alone, at least in constant, get together and be able to challenge the hunger for growth? And it's absolutely uncivilized kind of behavior that these people indulge in. So I would say that we should really, I would separate this. One China is a different concept. I would say, let's reappraise the Tibet policy. Let's divide them into different segments. India's got to have one Tibet policy. India has to have one Taiwan policy. India has to have one Hong Kong policy. It has to have one Xinjiang policy. We have to have even start looking at New Mongolia for a bit. After all, that also has been annexed over a period of time, and the Russians sort of gave it away. But so we need to develop different paradigms, and we need to get into a more pragmatic and flexible way of actually carrying this out by having different alignments with people who see the same thing and be able to bring this pressure around together. It will need a tremendous amount of. I think the Americans are taking a lead, and I'm saying that we don't need to follow that. But look at what is happening in the Senate. The bill that is recently has gone through the representative and has gone to the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. It's getting clear from them coming back to Senate, where you're giving Tibet. They're recognizing Tibet again. It's not independence that they're talking about. They're not talking about autonomy, but they're looking at support for Tibet. Now, these are some of the things which we can do as a civilized society. We don't have to do what people who are uncivilized do, or pseudo-civilized people. But we could do in the norms and standards that are acceptable to the wide community of nations. There are people right around the world who respect law, who respect good behavior. Let's look at the entire European community today. I'm talking in today's context, and would see a commonality and mutuality of interest to be able to halt China in its track before it continues to go wildly into an aggressive and an expansive move. Xinjiang, look at it, it's suffering. Look at the kind of repression Xinjiang has undergone in the last few years, but it's holding. It has no leadership. It is just happening by different people because they're conscious, they feel that there is a cause for them to fight. They're doing it. I would reach out to people like Tenzin and others, the youngest crowd, have to look at this kind of thing. I think they have been so fortunate, and I think the world has been very fortunate to have somebody with a tall leader and a very respected human being in His Highness, His Holiness the Dalai Lama. This is a rallying point. We have to find out. I think we have to get much closer to them. We have to understand each other. We have to give them a little more than we have taken away in the last. I think we really nurtured them. We looked after them and respected them and kept away from the politics of theirs. But we respected them as religious people and we allowed them activity. I think the time has come to recognize reality and say, all right, guys, you carry on doing what you have to. But you have to do it, and you have to do it with a complete confidence with each other as to what you are doing. So we are also understanding exactly what is happening within the system. It's a very critical system. They are here with us. We are together. We live, close to each other. I've been visiting SOS villages. I've traveled. I've been served in Ladakh for years. So one knows. I've been to Tibet at least once for a longish time. So I understand what's happening there. And I understand what is ailing them, what is irking them, what is irritating them. But they also have to come out and be able to share with India and the policymakers in India what is in their mind, what do they want to do, what harm, and stress from them how they can build a coordinated response to China, not individual. I think there is somewhere along the line, from what I read in the last couple of years, there are some gaps in there. So I think there has to be a far greater coordination, a greater respect, and we have to, if I can use a phrase, we have to redevelop the Tibet card. I think it has gone away for a while. We need to bring it back on the table and proceed from there, and then work with other countries. Am I still there?
Yes,
Okay.
I can.
And we have to work with other countries, like-minded countries, and with our own interests in mind. Please, I don't think we need to lap up somebody else's policy. I honestly, in my own, again, I'm talking in a very personal capacity here, and I'm certainly not in the system to see what's going on inside government. But I sometimes feel that, there was a time 2 years ago when I felt that the Americans and the Chinese will probably do some deal. And, you see the kind of migration that Tibetans have had into the US. Are we going to hold the baby and hold the can and wait towards you and we can step out? So there are few things that we need to build far confidence and trust between the Tibetan people in India and the rest of the diaspora in the world and the leadership. Very close, very understanding relationship. And then let's get on to, whether you go on to these things of policy, whether we look at autonomy, are you looking at independence? Very far away, and one country's recognition doesn't make any difference to us. We have to change the ground situation. We've got to tell the Chinese where to get off. And this has to be a very gradual, very coordinated, very sustained, and consistent process. We cannot be, I think, in the news, I don't want to repeat, but sometimes, Abhijit said, I agree with that. I agree with that. That, sometimes we are too transactional in our relationship. You use them, we don't want them, we put them into the can, we've got a deal going somewhere else. We have to understand after 15 June that the Chinese cannot be trusted. Look at what they're doing. Look at the kind of insurgencies the people they have in their own territory. Look, and if the reports are to be believed, see what they're doing up in Pakistan. They may not be there. They support Pakistan everywhere. They are supporting them. They're protecting them for being declared a state in the UN. They're protecting them from the FATF. Look at what they're doing. So if you're not even harboring them, but you're abetting, you're allowing, I won't say use the word conniving, maybe too strong a word, but abetting it or turning a blind eye to this. Should we be doing the same thing? Should we still be playing decent and a great neighbor and a very peaceful civilization? I think we need to change the narrative, and I think we need to project India as a friendly country, but willing to go on the offensive. We are willing to cross what we consider our border and hit somebody who hurts me. We've done it with Pakistan, but I think Pakistan is somebody. I think we are too overly obsessed with Pakistan. China is the main problem, and we need to tackle this at a very big level. Let me stop here, and then maybe next time around I will talk to time and give you some more ideas about what we could do in concert with countries like the US or the European Union and even Japan, or even the Australians who are on board of these kinds of things. Maybe Russians in a limited way.
Can you hear me? Hello. Abhijit. Hello. Abhijit, are you there?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yes. So I have a question. I mean, Krishan sir, Kondapalli sir, Abhijit sir, this is a general question, but a little digression also. I mean, in various quarters, it is being said that this whole Galwan thing and Chinese thing. Okay, I mean, this we are trying to look at it in a very immediate sense of time, but maybe it is a possibility that it was planned something long back, and it's a joint Pakistani-Chinese, something like that. If you look at it, since I have worked in Kashmir, after the abrogation of Article 370, there were strong, information and inputs about a large number of foreign terrorists coming into Kashmir. And though it has not been confirmed officially, but a very confidential and very authoritative sources inform that there are about 400 FTs in Kashmir, foreign terrorists hiding in Kashmir. And if we look at the past trends, in most of the encounters, local terrorists have died. These foreign terrorists are highly trained commandos, and and some of them have been trained even by the Sadat commando of Turkey. They don't come out. Even on some occasion, if an encounter takes place in that occasions, even our senior army officers have died, but most of them have not come out. In terms of analysis, we could possibly link it up with this Pakistani game plan, that if there is something on the Chinese front, they try to advance into our territory, and these foreign terrorists which have been brought into our territory, they might try to mobilize the local sentiment, the local populace against the Indian army itself. I mean, how do you look at it from a purely strategic, tactical point of view?
Look, as far as I can tell, Pakistan has always been at least as non-aligned as India in practice, if not in word, right? We've been surveilling their capabilities, their movements on satellite for almost a month and a half now, both the Chinese and the Pakistanis. On Pakistan, we're not seeing any kind of build-up on their side because, conventional build-ups leave a very large intelligence signature. We're not seeing that. So as far as collusion goes, there was lots of talk about Chinese planes on Skardu Air Base. Now, I don't know what these people are seeing because we have satellites that move there over Skardu Air Base every 6 hours. For the last 1 month, we've seen absolutely no Chinese plane land out there. So I really don't know if they're looking at the wrong airbase or they're consuming LSD or some methamphetamine of some kind, which is playing with their brains. Given their caliber of reporting, of course, that's not beyond the realm of possibility. But let's get to the main issue here, which is Chinese-Pakistani collaboration. This has always been sort of the genius of China, that it doesn't come to the help of Pakistan. Pakistan doesn't seek its help. It gives it. China gives Pakistan and its other allies like North Korea trinkets like nuclear weapons, which make them almost self-reliant in their in the threat that they pose. You need to come up with things like this. It can't be nuclear weapons, fine. But look, this is what the previous speaker said. You can't be transactional about these things. You have to cultivate all these relationships as long-term relationships. India has a very notorious habit of using people and dumping them. We use the Balochis and then we dump them. In the 70s, Morarji Desai gave up our intelligence network as a sign of goodwill. Then in the 1990s, again, I.K. Gujral did the exact same thing over and over again. You can't build up assets or trust having policies like this. It's very, very problematic. And, there's ultimately, to deal with the Chinese, to use that Hindi word, khud ko pehle buland karna hai. Ye abhi jo situation hai, it just can't continue the way it is. Are the Chinese planning on hitting us? Yes, I suspect they are. Right now is a point of great danger. They're not going to hit us in any conventional way, but they are going to hit us in some way. I don't know what it is, but they are definitely preparing to hit us.
Thank you, Abhijit. Hello. Am I audible?
Yeah.
Hello. Yeah. So thank you, Abhijit. You brought us especially this part of dumping people, not cultivating permanent assets, and having no consistency in terms of, approaching and nurturing, keeping our assets. This is a major problem. And certainly that requires very long-term investments and even reforms, changes in the approach which we have in our intelligence setup. That's true. So with this, I think we are already running past time, and I would like to end it. I would like to thank all our eminent panelists for giving their time and having such a wonderful discussion on a very relevant issue. And once again, my sincere apologies for the technical glitch which happened during the course of the talk. Sometimes these things are unavoidable, but my sincere apologies for that. Once again, thank you very much, and hope to see you soon again in some other talk. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, fellow panelists. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Krishan sir. Thank you, Abhijit.
Everybody, and my
Check
apologies.
whether this
The problem
was
was on my side.
this glitch that happened, whether it was caused by some kind of hack or not. Just check on that.
It was not a hack.
Something that crossed my mind. I can tell you that.
It was not a hack.
Maybe they didn't like the idea of what we were predicting over here. But having said that, I think we should be really mindful of the propensity of these people to interfere. They are listening to everything, so you've got to be a little careful and guarded. But let them know what you're thinking. Sometimes it's good to speak your mind and let them feel that we are beginning to think in a more aggressive manner.
We want them to hear us. We want them to hear us.
Exactly. Sometimes it's a good thing to pass that message.
Today morning, my email stopped working, so I had similar doubts. And random applications to participate in the webinar, with some weird names, strange biographies. So I mean, that was really quite fishy for me. So these things are happening, but we have to be gearing up ourselves for this. Yeah. Thank you very much.
So much. Have a nice evening, all of you, and we'll get back again soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye bye.